types of rampant and intentional wrongdoing alleged by Dr. Whitehurst.
We are going to do every reasonable step to make sure that there is no suggestion of impropriety or a potential impact on any defendant's right to a fair trial.
Today on Burden of Proof, the Inspector General's report on the FBI crime lab is finally out. How explosive is it?
This is Burden of Proof with Greta Van Susteren and Roger Cossack.
Welcome to Burden of Proof. Roger's off today. And the Justice Department Inspector General's report on the FBI crime lab is finally out. The report is critical of the lab, especially the lab's explosives unit, and its work in both the Oklahoma City and the World Trade Center bombing cases. However, the Inspector General said he clears the FBI of the most serious charges in regard to the Oklahoma case. Michael Zeldin, you're a former federal prosecutor. The Inspector General says that he clears the FBI of problems connected with the Oklahoma City case, but let me take you directly to his written report. And this is what he says. He said that he's talking about the special agent who did the testing in the case, and he says, in other respects, his work was flawed and lacked a scientific foundation. The errors he made were all tilted in such a way as to incriminate the defendants. We concluded that Williams, that's the agent, failed to present an objective, unbiased, and competent report. How can the Inspector General possibly whitewash this and say this isn't a problem for the FBI and the prosecution?
Well, I'm not sure that he's saying that. I think what he's saying is that in the context of a particular case, the work of this agent did not materially affect the outcome of the analysis. And that's the standard that you'll have to apply in all of these cases. You'll have to go case by case, parsing each investigation and determining whether the evidence was materially affected by this and whether that evidence materially affected the outcome of the trial. So I think Mike Bromwich's language here is perhaps too soft, that they clear, meaning that they found nothing wrong, but rather that he's saying, in this case, this will not affect the outcome of this trial. The case can go forward and will move without this agent's testimony, without his forensic work.
Mike, I'll tell you why I disagree with you, and I would seize upon this if I were the attorneys for Timothy McVeigh. I would say the FBI is tilting evidence in a way to incriminate a defendant. What I would do is I would cross-examine every single agent that walks into the courtroom in every area of this investigation and talk about the bias. When you talk about tilting evidence, the FBI is supposed to be objective. Tilting evidence, and that's their own internal or a report done at least by the Justice Department.
No question. As a defense attorney, what Stephen Jones is going to do is going to attack the credibility of every single witness and ask the jury to disagree, if you will, with their findings. What they'll ultimately say is that the defendant did this crime, and they're going to say that they are not positioned to properly make that conclusion. Their bias has seeped over, it has become material, and it has affected the outcome that they want the jury to reach.
Well, they don't even just talk in the report about tilting evidence by the FBI, but what this report also does is merits that the agents, two agents involved in this investigation, merit special censure. Jerry Richard, you're a former FBI agent. What is that, a special censure, or merit special censure? What does that mean to you?
Well, I believe they need to be reprimanded according to the report, and I totally agree. If a bias or a tilting of the facts were towards the prosecution, it should be censored. But we've got to remember here that this is a laboratory of over 600 people, including over 200 examiners. In any laboratory, in any organization, we're going to have people we're dealing with, and not all of them are going to be absolutely perfectly unbiased. However, when we find cases like this, they should be dealt with, but that is not to say that we should paint the entire laboratory with this broad brush of being biased or tilted towards the prosecution, because it just isn't true.
Jim Norris, you're a forensic scientist, and when I read the report that FBI agents who are scientists are tilting evidence, it sends shivers up my spine, as it should anyone who wants to fairly consider the evidence to see if someone is guilty or not guilty. Can you defend the action of the FBI in tilting evidence to incriminate a defendant?
Oh, absolutely not. It's a situation here, I think, there's a structural problem, and that is the FBI has been using for years actual FBI agents as examiners. Most forensic laboratories have gotten away from that probably 30 years ago. They now use civilians, and I think that's the one thing that stands out in this report. They need to get away from agents and go to civilians in the laboratory.
I totally disagree with that. I think the agents are more than qualified in most cases. In addition, they have the experience in the investigations. It has nothing to do with biasness. They have tremendous experience in the area of investigations before they ever get to the laboratory. The actual laboratory has an opportunity to view these people ahead of time. Many laboratories have a big problem today with hiring people that they have no background on, no knowledge of. They hire them, and they may be good scientists, but they may also have many other problems that don't fit into a laboratory atmosphere.
But Jerry, let me take you one step further, though. This doesn't seem to be an isolated event with Oklahoma. Let me take you to the report and to the World Trade Center, in which the Inspector General stated this: "We concluded that the agent in that case gave inaccurate and incomplete testimony and testified to invalid opinions that appeared to tailor to the most incriminating result." That isn't fair.
Well, here we have a different situation. Again, it's the same unit, the same group of people, and the allegation is that these people are not scientists. This is true. That one unit, most of the individuals, some of them do not have scientific backgrounds, quote unquote, but most of them have tremendous experience in the area of explosives, and they have spent much of their time in the military dealing with explosive problems, what have you, a tremendous amount of background and experience, and have a tremendous amount of schooling in these areas.
You know, that sounds good, Jerry, but we're talking, you know, in my view, when I hear the word tailoring results, or when I hear tilting evidence, that's a code word to me for deceit and for unfairness. Michael?
I think I think you have a point there, that FBI agents, no agent who's supposedly there to present scientifically neutral testimony, this is what the facts are, if you will, should be tailoring their testimony to anything. But it doesn't reach, your logic fails when it says that in a particular case, the outcome should be affected by that. Mike Bromwich says that one of the remedial changes that he's going to make as a result of his investigation is to make sure that the forensic lab people have scientific underpinnings for their for the positions that they hold. They will become scientists when they're not scientists. But I think Jerry's point is also right, which is that you have to marry science with investigative know-how. Science in the abstract doesn't get you very far in figuring out how to analyze an investigative
I mean, I understand
clue.
Jerry's point, and I agree we need to have competent, good people in the lab. But I think we're talking about something worse here. When the Inspector General gave his press conference earlier today, he talked about the fact that they couldn't substantiate all of Agent Whitehurst's complaints, and he said that they didn't find any evidence of perjury. Well, let me read again from the report. And it says, with respect to the investigation of Judge Hastings, who was tried a number of years ago, he's now in Congress, it says, with respect to the Hastings matter, we concluded that Special Agent Malone falsely testified that he had performed a tensile test. To me, that's lying. Isn't that perjury when an agent says...
There's no question about that. But what you've done, in a sense, is you set up Mike Bromwich's press conference language against his report. I think what really matters here is his report. His report, which you're reading from, says we find all these things. What will be important to determine whether the FBI is acting in good faith, whether the Justice Department is taking remedial action, is what happens next. We've made these findings. We've found in the Hastings case this. We found in the Oklahoma bombing trial this. We found in the Word Trial Center this. What are they going to do about it next?
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Agent Whitehurst's lawyers, as well as a defense lawyer who has filed to get more information behind this investigative report of the FBI. Stay with us.
I've got that they had a finding of testimony.
Welcome back. The special agent who blew the whistle on the FBI is Special Agent Whitehurst. His lawyer joins us. Dave, in the report that mentions your client, Special Agent Frederic Whitehurst, it says that he has caused harm to innocent persons by making many inflammatory but unsubstantiated allegations. What do you say about the harm he may have caused?
I think that's taking out of context what Dr. Whitehurst did. Dr. Whitehurst wrote confidential letters to the Inspector General pursuant to a standard which is the following. FBI agents are required by regulation to report possible indications of misconduct. That's what he did. And what the IG has done is criticize him for reporting indications of misconduct in which he was not in a position to prove allegations. And they're blaming him for raising those allegations. And I think that's very much unfair to Dr. Whitehurst.
It also says in the report that there are doubts that exist about whether Special Agent Frederic Whitehurst whether he has the requisite common sense and judgment to serve as a forensic examiner. How do you answer that?
I'm saying that is not in accord with the performance appraisals that Dr. Whitehurst received throughout the years of his work there. He was rated as the FBI's top forensic examiner in the area of explosives and explosive residue, even after he was removed from those duties in the laboratory. He was the #1 bomb expert that the laboratory had 2 days before the Oklahoma City bombing, yet he was not sent to Oklahoma and he was not assigned to investigate that case. I think that there are very serious, troubling aspects to what the IG has said with respect to Dr. Whitehurst, and we think that really it's not in accord with what's going on. It's an attempt to put a gloss on the bad news that is coming about the FBI crime lab.
All right, Dan, you represent the National Association for Criminal Defense Lawyers. You have filed a lawsuit asking for this report. The report is now out. Are you satisfied?
We are concerned that there are other cases. We're talking about a limited number of cases here today, but the Inspector General said that he focused his investigation only on cases that came to his attention. He made no attempt to look at all cases that have been handled by the lab. We are very concerned that there may be similar problems in many other cases.
But aren't defense lawyers going to create that for you? I mean, won't defense lawyers now come forward and say, look, this special agent who has been censured in the report worked on my client's case. I want my case reviewed for my client.
Well, that's why we want these findings disseminated. I was struck by what is in the report, some of the findings, such as scientifically flawed testimony, inaccurate testimony, testimony beyond the examiner's expertise, improper preparation of laboratory reports, and on and on. Defense lawyers should understand that there's a lot of material in this, and they should get hold of it, and they should see if it applies to their case.
Jerry, I know that one bad apple in an organization doesn't mean the whole organization is bad. In fact, that's one of always the dangers when someone when we point the finger at someone and say the person's done a bad job. But the thing that strikes me is the fact that it is only Dave's client who has come forward to blow the whistle. And we have, in this report, they talk about the World Trade Center, they talk about Oklahoma, there's a death penalty case down in Florida. Where were all the other agents? Can you defend the fact that no other agent came forward?
Yes, basically, I don't think the allegations that Mr. Whitehurst has put forth, the grand majority of them hold any merit whatsoever, as the IG has also held. I've known Fred Whitehurst since he came to the lab. I've known his reputation. I've known him throughout the laboratory, and to be very truthful, at best he is probably looked on by other examiners and other agents as a loose cannon.
But how can you say that when it was his allegations, and admittedly not all of them have been substantiated, but his allegations produced this report, blew this whistle, and there's one case that really strikes me as reprehensible, and that's a death penalty case down in Florida. And on page 17 of the report, it says that the agent offered an opinion stronger than his analytical results would support. The man's on death row. Whether he's guilty or not is another issue, but it's got to be fair.
That's a judgment factor, isn't it, though? Isn't that a judgment factor? The scientists who reviewed that case are second-guessing an examiner who did the exam and testified and felt at that level he could make that comment. Now, you've got 5 people that come in afterwards, several years later, re-examine the evidence that's done, and then go ahead and second-guess it.
Well, let's ask our other forensic scientists. Jim in San Francisco, what do you think?
Well, I think, and I'll reiterate, I think there's a structural problem here, and that is sworn FBI agents are sworn to prosecute people, and sometimes you'll get an agent who may cross over the line. Most of them don't. I hold the FBI laboratory in very high regard, and I think they just need to make some structural changes.
Jerry, you disagree?
No, he misses the point. Prosecutors prosecute crime. FBI agents investigate crime.
Michael, if they're tilting evidence, I don't blame the prosecutors. It's the FBI that's coming in saying to the prosecutor, these are the test results. It's tilting. It's crooked.
2 points. In response to the last point from San Francisco, his point is we should have civilians in the lab because FBI agents are there to prosecute crime. That's simply factually incorrect. They're not there to prosecute crime. Prosecutors and U.S. attorneys' offices prosecute crime. You don't need civilians. You just need to ensure the quality of the agents in the lab. Secondly, with respect to the material misrepresentations that Bromwich points out, you've got to separate that which is sort of perjurious and factually incorrect from opinions which people can reasonably differ on, which is why in the lawsuit...
Is that the tilting? Do you consider opinions tilting?
Well, it depends, Greta. If I say, is Greta wearing a nice blouse or not, I can say yes, or someone else can say no. It's an opinion. Do I tilt it toward you to say yes because I like you and I've known you a long time? Probably. Is that perjurous? Will that affect the outcome of anything? No. Maybe our friendship, but beyond that,
our friendship.
No. But so I think you have to separate what's important and material from what is not. And I think that the lawsuit filed by NACDL will help explicate those things, and I think by case-by-case analysis you'll determine whether or not this is an opinion, Michael, or a fact.
I guess, Michael, I don't consider sort of an innocent tilting, and I don't think that the Inspector General does when they also censor the agent involved, and so I don't think it's so innocent.
Well, I'm not saying in each case everything is innocent. I'm saying flesh it out case by case. In the cases where there is censure, where it's not innocent tilting, but in the nature of misrepresentation or lies. Some of the report says that people said that they conducted tests which they never in fact conducted. That's perjury.
Right,
and they should be handled properly that way.
All right, we need to take a break. I've been critical of the FBI. When we come back, we're going to find some solutions. Stay with us. Still do. I am critical of the lab, or at least the people mentioned in this report. If you ran the lab at the FBI, what suggestion would you make to improve it?
I'd be alarmed by the comments made by Mr. Bromwich today that they found systemic problems.
So how do you fix it?
Well, they need to be accredited. The lab is not accredited. That's the first step. The second step is they desperately need outside oversight, somebody from the outside to look at what they're doing. They need peer review from other scientists. They need more science in the lab. I think that's clear just by reading the report.
Jim, how would you fix this?
Basically in the same way. They need to be accredited, and as the report says, they should hire an outside director of the laboratory.
Jerry, you've been there.
I don't think, I honestly believe that they should be accredited, and they've been working towards accreditation. However, our lab has much more difficult problem, and it's just because of its size and its location, into getting the accreditation. That will all be resolved in the near future. However, I don't believe that we need an outside director who is a scientist. It would be beneficial, but that is not the main function of a director. A director is an administrator.
Michael, when you talk about outside person to look over, it sounds almost like an independent counsel for the FBI lab. Right. You've been an assistant independent counsel. What about the idea of having someone on the outside looking over the shoulders of our law enforcement? I would prefer to have it be homegrown. I would prefer that Louis Freeh take the lead on this thing, correct the cultural problems that Mike Bromwich points out in the report, and ensure that the lab rejoins the majority of the lab technicians there with respect to its original mission, which is science, investigative findings, results, not biased testimony, not result-oriented work. Dan?
The culture needs to be a culture of truth-seeking and seeking justice, and I think the leadership has to come from the top. The culture is set by the leadership at the top.
Michael, what do we do about the fact that there is this tilting, as I keep harping on?
That's what Louis Freeh has got to deal with. Louis Freeh has got to spend some time in that lab. He's got to spend some time with those agents. He's got to reiterate what is it that we are here to do and make sure that there isn't tilting, that there isn't bias, and that there is objective science. That's his responsibility now.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thanks to all our panelists today.